My name is Nora Thompson. Like most evenings since coming to Monte Carlo, I was sitting by myself in a little cafe on the outskirts of the busy casino square tonight. Although it's a long cry from the opulent lifestyle I was raised in, all I wanted was a simple break after graduating from a prestigious American institution. It feels like my dad controls half the world, from hotels to computer companies. To avoid the V and to keep things honest, I go by my mother's last name. He entered when the night was beginning to chill. Daniel appeared to be the owner, or at least believed he was. He pulled out the chair across from me without asking, stumbling over with a confidence that I suppose comes with wearing a suit that costs more than most people's rent. After seating down, he eventually said, "Mind if I sit?" He had a charming grin that had likely been studied. I said, "Looks like you're already sitting," without raising my gaze from my coffee. His laugh was a little too silky. "I'm Daniel, and you are." I exclaimed sharply, "Nora," and gave him a rapid checkup. Too polished, yet admittedly attractive, not my typical type. "So, Nora, what brings a girl like you to a pricey haunt like this all by yourself?" I wasn't sure if I was pleased or angered by the hint of teasing in his tone. "Just enjoying my coffee," was my evasive response. "What's your excuse?" I'd be lying if I said business. He looked at me steadily and said, "Let's just say I'm looking for something interesting tonight, and it looks like I might have found it." I arched an eyebrow. "Hope the coffee lives up to your expectations then." Daniel chuckled. "Something tells me it's already exceeded them." I had no intention of making pals. I'm definitely not seeking a casual relationship. Look, I'm not one of those girls who falls for lines, if that's what you're aiming for, and I'm certainly not interested in whatever game you're playing. He lowered his voice a little and said, "Who says I'm playing a game?" "Experience," was my response. "What do you expect when you sit down without being invited and form a line? A number on the phone? A date?" He appeared truly amused as he leaned back. "You're tough now. That's nice. Just a discussion, not a phone number. Say the word and I'll disappear, though if it's too much." I thought about him for a while. Despite its beauty, Monte Carlo was lonely. It might not harm to have a little conversation. Conversation is fine, but keep it light. We spoke for a long time. It was a fairly simple talk. I didn't provide any personal information, and he didn't ask for any. Despite my initial misgivings, I found that I was genuinely enjoying the conversation as the night became darker. Unlike other males, Daniel didn't try to impress me with his wealth or connections. His demeanor suggested that he was accustomed to nicer things, but that they did not define him. When the evening finally cooled off, it was time to leave. My words were, "Well, Daniel, this was unexpectedly pleasant," and I got up to go. His smile said, "Surprised yourself, huh?" "Just a little, perhaps." "Daniel, good night." His remarks rang a little in my head as I made my way back to my flat. There were a lot of surprises in Monte Carlo, and maybe, just maybe, I had found one tonight. The nights in Monte Carlo were a little less lonely after that initial meeting with Daniel. Whether I was out exploring the local markets during the day or enjoying a late supper by myself, he had a way of showing up wherever I was. Unexpectedly, his perseverance was precisely the opposite of frustrating. Perhaps because he wasn't demanding. He simply appeared sincere in wanting to spend time with me. He came over with 2 coffees and sat down next to me without saying anything one windy evening while I was watching the sunset. Assuming I want coffee, I raised an eyebrow in teasing. He gave me a cup. "If I'm wrong, I'll drink both." I remarked, "Good guess," and took the coffee. The sound of the waves filled the calm moments as we sat in solitude for a while. Daniel finally broke the stillness by saying, "You never told me what you do back in the States." Didn't think it mattered, I declared with a shrug. "I'm employed. I'm really enjoying not working right now." "Fair enough," he said with a laugh. "Everyone's got a story, though, don't you think?" We settled into a simple pattern over the course of the following several days. I was shown areas of Monte Carlo by Daniel I had yet to investigate. We discussed everything and nothing, including our favorite cuisines, movies, and literature. I was all for the classics, like Sean Connery, while he was adamantly supporting Daniel Craig as the greatest James Bond actor. We were walking on the beach one day when he abruptly stopped and gave me a serious look that I had never seen him give me before. "Nora, I know I'm just some guy you met at a cafe, but these past weeks have been, I don't know, different, better because of you." Unsure of how to react, I also halted. I had no intention of dealing with feelings here. "Daniel, I like hanging out with you." "I do, but this is just a break for me. I'm not looking for complications." He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "I get it. No pressure. Just know that I'm here, okay. And I think you're pretty amazing." Days turned into weeks, and my time in Monte Carlo was drawing to a close. Daniel and I spent more and more time together, and what started as casual walks and talks turned into late-night dinners and early morning breakfasts. It was the last thing I expected, falling for someone under the Mediterranean stars. Then one evening, he dropped a bombshell. "Come back with me, Nora. Work at my company in the States." I know it's sudden, but I don't know. I just think it could be great. The idea was crazy, completely insane, and yet part of me was tempted by the adventure, by the idea of taking this, whatever it was, and seeing where it could go. Moving back to the States felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Daniel's offer wasn't just a job, it was an invitation into his life. And suddenly, I was living in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary part of town, playing the role of an ordinary girl who'd lucked out. My father, however, had different ideas about ordinary. He showed up unannounced one afternoon, just as I was unpacking my last box. His booming laugh filled my small living room as he stood in the doorway, towering and larger than life. "Nora, hiding out in plain sight, huh?" He chuckled, giving me a big hug that almost crushed my ribs. "So tell me about this decision. This guy must be something special for you to up and move like this." His tone was light, but I could tell he was probing, doing his fatherly duty to sniff out any trouble. I sighed, sitting down on the couch. "His name's Daniel. He's different, Dad. He doesn't know about all this," I said, waving vaguely around, implying the wealth and the complicated strings that came with it. Dad sat down next to me, his expression serious now. "Nora, you know you can't keep that a secret forever. If he's going to be part of your life, he should know who you are." "I know, Dad. I want to be sure about him before I complicate things. Thanks for looking out for me, though." He ruffled my hair like he used to when I was a kid. "Always, kiddo. Just remember, if you need anything, I'm just a call away. And I've got eyes everywhere," he added with a wink. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to my new job and new life. Daniel was a constant presence, supportive, and as charming as ever. But there was an edge to him now, a sort of sharpness that came with the responsibilities he carried. One night, over a quiet dinner at my place, Daniel brought up a topic I'd been dreading. "Nora, when do you think I'll get to meet your parents? I feel like I'm missing a big part of your life." I paused, the weight of the moment settling over me. "Well, my mom passed away a long time ago, and my dad's just a regular trucker. We're not exactly on speaking terms right now." Daniel frowned, a hint of concern crossing his face. I'm sorry to hear that. But whenever you're ready, I'd like to meet him. Family is important. I nodded, appreciating his sentiment, but knowing full well the reality of my father's world, a world I wasn't ready to introduce Daniel to just yet. Life with Daniel moved at a pace. I never expected we were already blending our lives together. My job at his company was going great, and we were getting deeper into our relationship. I guess it all seemed like we were gearing up for something big, but I was still taken aback when that big moment actually happened. It was a normal evening. We were at his place, a cozy, upscale apartment with views of the city skyline. We had just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just some takeout because neither of us felt like cooking. We were sitting on the couch, a documentary about ocean life playing in the background, the kind you watch but don't really watch. Daniel turned to me, his expression more serious than the situation called for. He took my hand, and suddenly I felt my heart start to race. Nora, I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through, and everything I want for us in the future. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. Yeah, I love you, Nora. I love everything about you, and I don't want to imagine my life without you. He paused, and I could see him swallow hard, like he was nervous. That made two of us. I want to be with you always. Will you marry me? Just like that. No getting down on one knee. No ring box being opened. It was straightforward, genuine, and so very Daniel. Yes, I said, the word coming out in a rush, almost a relief. Yes, I will. He flashed that wide, infectious grin that had won me over from day one and hugged me tight. We spent the rest of the evening talking about our future, what we wanted, where we saw ourselves. It was exciting and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge came when I told my dad. I expected him to be happy, but his response was lukewarm at best. Nora, you know I want nothing but your happiness, but are you sure about this? It's all happening so fast, he said, his voice heavy with concern. I'm sure, Dad. He's a great guy, you'll see. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. He sighed. All right, but promise me you'll sign a prenuptial agreement, just to be safe. The word prenuptial didn't scare me. It was just another part of the modern marriage package, especially with someone who had as much to lose as I did, even if Daniel didn't know the full extent of it. Of course, Dad. We'll handle it, I assured him. That's good then. And Nora, I won't be at the wedding. I don't want to spoil your story about being a simple girl. Then came the introduction to Daniel's mother. Her reception was icy from the start. During dinner at their family home, she scrutinized me with a look that chilled the room. Daniel, are you sure about this girl? She doesn't seem like a fit for our family, she remarked bluntly. Daniel tried to smooth things over, but his mother was relentless. A prenuptial agreement is non-negotiable, she insisted. I agreed without hesitation, knowing it would ease some tension. Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way, I said, as we later formalized the terms with a lawyer present. Despite these hurdles, our wedding in the Maldives was breathtaking. Standing beside Daniel, with the ocean whispering behind us and the sand beneath our feet, I felt a surge of hope. It was just us, our love, and a future we were ready to shape together. Despite the rocky start with family expectations, married life started off better than I could have hoped. Daniel and I settled into our new house, a beautiful place with more space than we'd ever need. It was supposed to be the beginning of our perfect life together. I threw myself back into work, determined to prove that I was more than just the boss's wife. My role at the company had always been challenging, but now there was an added layer of expectations. I was not only managing projects, but was also part of key decision-making processes. Daniel seemed proud, at least initially. He would introduce me in meetings with a hint of pride in his voice. "This is Nora, my wife, and our project lead." However, as the months rolled on and the projects under my lead turned successful, bringing in significant profits and boosting the company's profile, something in Daniel shifted. It was subtle at first, a comment here, a slight remark there. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, he brought it up. "Nora, you're doing great at work." "Too great, maybe." I looked up from my plate, puzzled. "What do you mean, too great? Isn't that good for the company?" "It is," he admitted, pushing his food around on his plate. "But the guys are starting to say it's turning into the Nora show over there." His words stung a little. "Isn't that a bit unfair? I thought you'd be happy that we're doing well." "I am happy, but it's a lot. Everyone's always talking about you, about how you handle things. Makes me wonder." Where I stand, that conversation was the first of many. As the business grew, so did the strain between us. Daniel's once supportive demeanor was now tinged with resentment. I couldn't understand it. Wasn't he the one who had encouraged me to step up in the first place? Things got worse when his mother came to stay with us for a few weeks. Her presence in the house brought an old-world traditional attitude that I had always managed to avoid. She would make offhand comments about my work, about how a wife should be more present at home. "You're always at the office, Nora. When do you have time to take care of your husband?" she would say. I tried to shrug it off to keep the peace, but her words only deepened the growing rift between Daniel and me. It seemed no amount of success at work could compensate for what was slowly unraveling at home. The more I achieved, the more our marriage suffered. One evening, Daniel came home from work, his face set in a grim line. "Nora, I think it's best if you leave the company. We need to focus on our family, and it seems like your role there is just causing too much tension." "Leave the company? But why? I've been contributing so much." My voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. "It's for the best. You can focus on the house, maybe start that garden you've always talked about." His tone was dismissive, as if he were deciding on something trivial, not my career. The next day, I found out he had let go of all our house staff, housekeepers, cooks, gardeners. It was all on me now. "You wanted to be more involved at home. Here's your chance," he said, almost coldly. I wasn't scared of housework, but the way this was thrown at me felt wrong. This wasn't the loving, caring man I married. This was someone else, someone very intolerant and controlling. His mother, staying with us at the time, seemed to relish the situation. "It's good for a wife to focus on her home," she would say, smirking slightly whenever Daniel talked about my new role as a full-time housewife. As I adjusted to this unexpected turn in my life, I couldn't help but feel ashamed. Ashamed that I hadn't seen this coming. Ashamed to admit to my father that maybe he was right about Daniel. When Daniel suggested a trip to Monte Carlo to maybe rekindle what was left of our spark, I was hesitant but hopeful. That hope died quickly when his mother announced she'd join us. "It's been ages since I've traveled," she declared loudly, as if it were a decree that couldn't be opposed. Daniel, of course, welcomed her with open arms, not once considering what I might think. We rented a small house in Monte Carlo, which was charming but costly, and it quickly became my prison rather than a retreat. From the start, Daniel and his mother treated the city as their playground. They rented luxurious cars, visited exclusive boutiques, and dined at the finest restaurants, while I was left to manage the household. They demanded home-cooked meals, turning me into nothing more than a servant in a holiday home, cooking and cleaning after them as they gallivanted around the city. As days passed, Daniel's mother's digs grew sharper, her tone more venomous. Really, Nora, living at someone else's expense must be quite the life, huh? She'd sneer, her words a slap disguised in a smirk. Daniel never defended me. Instead, he laughed. His laughter was a betrayal, each time echoing around the cold walls of our temporary home. I felt isolated, the city sparkle muted by the shadow of their disdain. One evening, we passed a grand old-style hotel. Its facade was a reminder of a world of elegance and respect. Daniel's mother, her voice dripping with envy, remarked, "Lucky billionaire Harris. Imagine owning such a hotel, ruling over a palace like that." That night at a restaurant overlooking the sea, the last vestige of my patience crumbled as we sat down. She waved the waiter over with an imperious flick of her wrist. "For Nora, the cheapest dish will do. No need to spoil her with extravagances she doesn't deserve," she declared loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Daniel's response was a chuckle. His agreement came not just from his mouth, but from the dismissive flip of his hand. "Good call, Mom. Let's not go overboard." Humiliation washed over me like the waves crashing on the rocks below us. Rising from my chair, the clatter of my seat echoed my turmoil. I faced them both, my voice steady, louder than I intended. "I will not tolerate this any longer," I declared, my hands trembling but my resolve firm. "I am divorcing you, Daniel." The cold air of Monte Carlo was nothing compared to the chill of betrayal as I walked away from the restaurant. Daniel and his mother, rather than coming to apologize, followed me out with insults. As I quickened my pace, my mother-in-law's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "Just look at her, a beggar unworthy of my son." My heart raced, but before I could get far, Daniel caught up and grabbed my purse from my shoulder, his fingers clenching it tightly. "This is my money, Nora. Go on, get out on all fours if you have to." His voice was laced with contempt as he yanked the purse away, leaving me stunned on the sidewalk. Beside him, his mother laughed cruelly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Maybe now you'll learn to beg in Monte Carlo, since that's all you're good for." Their laughter echoed down the street as I stood there, wallless and alone. But as they hurled their final insults, fate stepped in. We were near that grand old hotel, the one Daniel's mother had earlier invited aloud, wishing she could own such a place. Pointing to the hotel, she sneered, "Maybe they'll let you in as a beggar." At that moment, the gates of the hotel opened, and a guard appeared. He saw me, recognition lighting up his face. "Miss Harris," he called out warmly, walking over with a respectful salute. The moment he said my name, the atmosphere shifted. Daniel and his mother paused, their expressions turning from satisfaction to confusion. The guard smiled broadly. "Your father told us you might come by. Please, this way. The best room is always reserved for you." As for Mr. Harris' instructions, Daniel's mother's face paled, her earlier words turning to ash in her mouth. "Harris, as in the billionaire Harris." She stammered, her earlier bravado crumbling. Ignoring them both, I walked towards the guard, my posture straightening. "Thank you, Pierre," I said, my voice calm and collected. Inside, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. Behind me, Daniel's pleas began. "Nora, please." I didn't mean. His mother, not to be outdone, shouted past her son. "Perhaps we could come in for a drink, at least?" I didn't look back. Entering the hotel, the doors closing behind me felt symbolic, shutting out the chaos of my old life. Pierre escorted me to the reception, where staff greeted me with the deference due to the daughter of their employer. The flight back to the United States was a long one, giving me plenty of time to ponder over my next steps. By the time I landed, my resolve had hardened like the city sidewalks, ready to be trodden upon, but unyielding to the pressure. The following day, I found myself in the office of a reputable lawyer, Papers spread out before me like a battle map. During your tenure at the company, it appears your husband failed to pay you bonuses owed for the multi-million-dollar deals you closed, the lawyer pointed out, his tone a mix of surprise and indignation. I groaned, my thoughts running over the innumerable hours I had dedicated to the business and the success I had fueled. That sounds about right, I said. We're suing for $3 million. Daniel stood there, stumbling through his defense, and the courtroom was cold and antiseptic, a sharp contrast to the angry glares he sent across the room. The man I used to adore appeared to be incredibly pitiful. Daniel's face fell as the decision was delivered, a landslide triumph that gave me $3 million. He made one final plea outside the courthouse. Everyone is making fun of me, Nora. I made a mistake. Can we begin again? Once his comments might have made me cry, but that moment was over. Daniel, all you miss is the money. Perhaps pay less attention to your mother the next time, I urged, my voice piercing the clear air. That chapter ended with the sound of my heels hitting the pavement as I turned and left. I went back home and confronted my father. Until I broke the quiet, there were many unspoken statements in the air between us. Dad, I should have listened to you. Warm and forgiving, he encircled me in his embrace. You have to figure things out for yourself. You know now. And half the fight is already won. We discussed life, errors, and fresh starts far into the night. His counsel served as a lighthouse for me as I made my way through my future-focused thinking. Motivated by our discussion, I started preparing for my next project. In addition to sharpening my abilities, working at Daniel's firm stoked an uncontrollable enthusiasm for the field. I made the decision to start my own investing company. I had the means to begin something significant, something that was mine, thanks to my experience and the hefty payment. As I started my business from scratch, weeks stretched into months. Even if the obstacles were overwhelming, I learned from each failure. Each accomplishment served as a reminder that I was headed in the right direction. I realized how far I'd gone from being a disillusioned wife in a loveless marriage to a capable company owner as I sat in my new office and looked out over the busy streets below. Although there had been many obstacles along the way, each one had strengthened me.
It was just another mundane Monday morning. I sat at my desk, staring at the computer screen, my fingers idly tapping against the keyboard. My eyes kept wandering to the bank statement lying next to me, a nagging feeling tugging at the back of my mind. Something wasn't right. I picked up the statement, scanning the list of transactions once again. A frown creased my forehead as I spotted the discrepancy, a recurring charge for an unfamiliar vendor amounting to a sizable sum each month. It didn't align with any of our typical expenses. "Nolan?" I called out to my husband, who was in the adjacent room. He poked his head through the doorway, his brows raised in question. "What's up, Bree?" I held up the bank statement, my eyes narrowing. "Do you know anything about these charges? They've been happening for a while now, and I can't figure out what they're for." Nolan glanced at the statement, his expression unreadable. He shrugged nonchalantly. "Must have slipped your mind. It's probably some subscription or something." I pursed my lips, unconvinced. "But for this much and for so long, I don't remember signing up for anything like this." He crossed the room, planting a kiss on my forehead. "You know how forgetful you can be sometimes," he said with a chuckle. "Don't worry about it. I'll look into it." His dismissive attitude only fueled my suspicion. I watched as he turned and left the room, a sinking feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. Throughout the day, my mind kept drifting back to the mysterious charges. Nolan's cavalier response did little to assuage my concerns. If anything, it made me more determined to uncover the truth. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I broached the subject again. "So, did you ever figure out what those charges were for?" Nolan paused mid-bite, his eyes flickering briefly before settling on mine. "Nope, haven't had a chance yet, but I'm sure it's nothing to worry about." His lack of urgency only served to heighten my unease. Nolan, we're talking about thousands of dollars here. How can you be so blasé about it? He let out an exasperated sigh. Brielle, I promise I'll look into it. But you need to trust me on this. Trust. The word hung heavy in the air, its weight pressing down on me. I wanted to trust him. I loved him, after all. But something deep within me refused to let go of the nagging doubt. As the days passed, the mysterious charges continued to appear, and Nolan's promises to investigate remained unfulfilled. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and with each passing day, it took root, growing stronger and more insidious. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to get to the bottom of this, no matter where the truth might lead. The days blurred together, each one more strained than the last. Nolan's late nights at the office became more frequent, his excuses growing flimsier with each passing week. The distance between us seemed to widen with every lie that slipped from his lips. Another late meeting, he muttered one evening as he rushed out the door, his tie askew and his briefcase haphazardly stuffed with papers. I didn't bother responding. What was the point? Theo, our 8-year-old son, watched his father's departure with a puzzled frown. Mom, why is Dad always working so late? I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. He's just been really busy lately, sweetheart. Don't worry about it. But Theo's innocent question stirred something within me. The seeds of doubt that had taken root were now sprouting, their tendrils wrapping around my heart and constricting tighter with each passing day. A few evenings later, as I was tucking Theo into bed, he piped up again. Mom, who's Cora? I froze, my heart skipping a beat. What did you say? Cora, he repeated, his brow furrowed. Dad keeps talking about her at work. A cold chill ran down my spine. Pushing down the rising panic, I managed a strained smile. I'm sure it's just someone from the office, honey. Nothing to worry about. But as I left Theo's room, my mind was racing. Who was this Cora? And why was Nolan constantly mentioning her name? The next day, I confided in my best friend Elise over coffee. Am I being paranoid here? I asked, my voice trembling. Or is there something going on that I'm missing? Elise's expression softened with concern. Bree, you know I love Nolan, but his behavior lately has been sketchy, to say the least. Those late nights, the unexplained charges, it's not looking good. I swallowed hard, my grip tightening around my mug. And now this Cora woman? What am I supposed to think? Elise reached across the table, squeezing my hand reassuringly. Look, I hate to say this, but I've heard rumors around the office about Nolan being seen with another woman. The air seemed to be sucked from my lungs. You're kidding. She shook her head solemnly. I wish I were. It could be nothing, but... Her words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The late nights, the mysterious charges, the unknown woman's name. A sickening realization washed over me. Could Nolan really be having an affair? A few weeks later, I found myself at a company event hosted by Nolan's firm. I had been dreading the evening, but I knew it was crucial to put on a brave face, at least for the time being. As I mingled with colleagues and their spouses, my eyes constantly scanned the room, searching for any sign of the mysterious Cora. Part of me hoped she was just a figment of my imagination, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But deep down, I knew the truth was far more sinister. And then, as if summoned by my very thoughts, she appeared. A stunning woman in a form-fitting red dress, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in perfect waves. She moved through the crowd with an air of confidence, turning heads wherever she went. My heart sank as I watched her approach a group of Nolan's coworkers, exchanging friendly banter and laughing at their jokes. This was her, Cora, the woman who had been occupying so much of my husband's time and thoughts. As if sensing my gaze, she turned and caught my eye. For a moment her expression faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished, replaced by a casual smile. She sauntered over to me, her hips swaying with each step. Hi there, she said, extending her hand. I'm Cora. You must be one of the wives. I forced a tight-lipped smile, grasping her hand briefly. Brielle. Nice to meet you. Her eyes widened ever so slightly, but she recovered quickly. Lovely to meet you too, Brielle. I've heard so much about you. The lie dripped from her lips like honey, sickly sweet and utterly false. Anger bubbled within me, but I kept my composure, nodding politely. So, Cora, I said, my voice carefully measured. How do you know my husband? She laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, we've been working on a project together for a while now. Nolan's just the best, always staying late to make sure everything's perfect. My stomach churned at the implication behind her words. So, this was the reason for all those late nights, all those flimsy excuses. Nolan had been spending his time with this woman, this Cora, right under my nose. That's wonderful, I managed, fighting to keep the sarcasm from seeping into my tone. He's so dedicated to his work. Cora nodded eagerly, oblivious to the venom laced in my words. Absolutely. He's been such a great partner to work with. She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper. Between you and me, he's mentioned a few times how his wife doesn't really understand the demands of his job. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms. The audacity of this woman standing before me and essentially admitting to her role in my husband's betrayal was almost too much to bear, but I forced myself to remain calm, to play along. For now. I would have my revenge, but it would be calculated, precise. Nolan and his mistress would reap what they had sown, and the consequences would be devastating. The days following the company event were a blur of pain and anger. I could barely look at Nolan without feeling a surge of white-hot rage coursing through my veins. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. I knew I needed to confront him, to finally bring this sordid affair into the light. But I also knew I couldn't do it blindly. I needed proof, evidence to back up my accusations. That's when I reached out to a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by a friend. Within days, he had compiled a dossier of damning information. Photographs of Nolan and Cora together, receipts for lavish dinners and hotel stays, even records of suspicious financial transactions. Armed with this arsenal of evidence, I summoned Nolan home early one evening, my hands trembling as I laid out the incriminating materials on the kitchen table. When he walked through the door, his brow furrowed at the sight before him. Bree, what's going on? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You know exactly what's going on, Nolan. Or should I say, you and Cora know what's going on. His face paled, his eyes flickering towards the damning evidence. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence, I snapped, my voice rising. I have proof of your affair. The late nights, the unexplained expenses, the cozy dinners and hotel trysts. It's all right here. Nolan's shoulders slumped, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Brielle, I'm so sorry. Sorry? I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. You're sorry? That's all you have to say after betraying me, after lying to me for who knows how long. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. It's not that simple. We grew apart, Bree. You were always so focused on your work, and I felt neglected. Cora, she made me feel appreciated again. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. So what? That justifies cheating on me. Lying to me, to our son? Nolan's gaze dropped, shame etched across his features. No, of course not. I know I've made a terrible mistake, but I want to make things right, Bree. I still love you. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and grating. Love me? You have a twisted way of showing it, Nolan. As I stared at the man before me, the one I had once trusted implicitly, I felt a steely resolve settle over me. This was not the end, not by a long shot. Nolan would pay for his betrayal, for the pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me and our family. And I would be the one to make him suffer the consequences of his actions. In the days following my confrontation with Nolan, a cold determination settled over me. I would not be the scorned wife, meekly accepting his betrayal and moving on. No, Nolan would face the full consequences of his actions, and I would be the one to ensure it happened. My first step was to consult with a lawyer, a shark in a tailored suit, recommended by a friend who had gone through an ugly divorce herself. As I laid out the evidence of Nolan's affair and financial misdeeds, her eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger. We're going to bleed him dry, she assured me, a savage grin spreading across her face. He won't know what hit him. With her guidance, I began meticulously documenting every transaction, every shred of proof that could be used against Nolan. Late nights were spent poring over bank statements and credit card bills, tracking the money he had funneled away to support his dalliances with Cora. Nolan, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued with his routine. working late, spinning his lies, and no doubt reassuring his mistress that everything would be fine. Little did he know, the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. In the meantime, I took steps to protect myself and Theo. Quietly, I began siphoning funds into a separate account, squirreling away a nest egg for when the inevitable fallout occurred. I knew Nolan would try to retaliate, to punish me for exposing his deceit, but I would be ready. Elise, my ever-loyal friend, was a constant source of support during this time. Over coffee and tear-stained tissues, she listened as I poured out my rage and anguish, offering a steady shoulder to lean on. "You're doing the right thing, Bree," she assured me, her eyes fierce with determination. "That bastard deserves everything that's coming to him." With each passing day, my resolve only grew stronger. I was a woman possessed, driven by a burning desire for justice and retribution. Nolan had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and he would pay dearly for that transgression. The final piece fell into place when I secured copies of Nolan's employment contract and company policy documents. Hidden amongst the legalese was a clause explicitly prohibiting misuse of company resources for personal gain, a violation that could result in termination. A slow, savage smile spread across my face as I realized the devastating implications. Not only would Nolan face the consequences of his actions in our personal lives, but his professional world was about to come crashing down as well. With the evidence compiled and my ducks in a row, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Nolan had made his bed, and now it was time for him to lie in it. The only question remaining was how far I would go to ensure his rightful punishment was carried out. And the answer? As far as it took. It was the annual Newland family gathering, an event Nolan and I used to look forward to each year. A chance to reconnect with relatives, share stories, and bask in the warmth of familial love. This year, however, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension. Nolan kept shooting furtive glances in my direction, no doubt sensing the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. As the evening progressed, I bided my time, making small talk and laughing at the appropriate moments. All the while, I could feel the weight of the evidence burning in my purse, a ticking time bomb waiting to detonate. Finally, as dessert was being served, I couldn't contain it any longer. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor, and cleared my throat loudly. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," I announced, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. Conversation died down, and all eyes turned towards me, a mixture of curiosity and concern etched on their faces. "I have something I need to share with all of you," I continued, tugging the manila envelope from my purse. "Something that concerns my husband, Nolan." Nolan's face drained of color, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. "Brielle, what are you doing?" he hissed. I ignored him, pulling out the stack of photographs and spreading them across the table. "These are just a few examples of the evidence I've gathered, proving that Nolan has been engaged in a long-term affair with another woman." Gasps rippled through the room, and I heard my mother-in-law let out a strangled cry. Nolan's siblings leaned in, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust. "It gets worse," I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word. "Not only has Nolan been unfaithful, but he's also been siphoning money from our joint accounts to fund his escapades with this woman." I produced the bank statements and receipts, laying them out alongside the damning photographs. "Brielle, please," Nolan pleaded, his face ashen. "This isn't the place." "No, this is exactly the place," I snapped, rounding on him. "You made your choices, Nolan. Choices that betrayed our vows, our family. Now it's time for you to face the consequences in front of everyone who knows us." Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the occasional sniffle or muffled sob. Nolan's head was bowed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But I wasn't done yet. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out the final document, the copy of Nolan's employment contract. "According to this, your actions constitute a gross misuse of company resources, which is grounds for immediate termination." Nolan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with horror. "No, you can't." "I can, and I will," I said, my voice laced with steel. "You've left me no choice, Nolan. You brought this upon yourself." With that, I gathered my belongings and made my way towards the door, pausing only to look back at the shattered remains of my once happy family. "I hope it was worth it," I spat, before turning on my heel and walking away, leaving Nolan to face the fallout of his betrayal head-on. The days following the family gathering were a whirlwind of activity. Nolan's betrayal had been laid bare for all to see, and the consequences were swift and merciless. I wasted no time in filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and infidelity as the grounds. My lawyer, ever the shark, ensured that the proceedings moved swiftly, leaving Nolan little room to maneuver. "He's finished," she assured me, a predatory gleam in her eye. "We're going to take him for everything he's worth," and take him we did. With the evidence of his affair and financial misdeeds, I was able to secure a favorable settlement, full custody of Theo, the house, and a sizable portion of our assets. Nolan, for his part, seemed resigned to his fate. The once confident man was reduced to a shell of his former self, his arrogance replaced by a haunted, hollow look. "Brielle, please," he begged during one of our meetings with the lawyers, "can't we try to work things out for Theo's sake?" I fixed him with a cold, steely gaze. "You should have thought about Theo before you decided to betray us. This is the bed you made, Nolan. Now lie in it." My words seemed to strike him like a physical blow, and he slumped back in his chair, defeated. But the true coup de grace was yet to come. With the divorce proceedings underway, I turned my attention to Nolan's professional life. Armed with the evidence of his misuse of company resources, I reached out to his firm's HR department, ensuring that the appropriate parties were made aware of his transgressions. Within days, the hammer dropped. Nolan was summoned to a meeting with his superiors, where he was confronted with the damning evidence of his affair and the financial trail leading back to the company. According to a friend who worked there, the confrontation was brutal, with Nolan's once-respected reputation lying in tatters. In the end, he was given an ultimatum: resign immediately or face termination and potential legal action. Nolan, his pride in shreds, had no choice but to tender his resignation. The news spread like wildfire through our social circles and professional networks. Whispers and sidelong glances followed Nolan wherever he went, his name tainted by the scandal of his own making. As for Cora, the woman at the center of the storm, she too faced consequences. Her involvement with a married man and the misuse of company resources that entailed cost her own job and reputation. In the blink of an eye, the lives they had so carelessly betrayed me to build together came crashing down around them. And through it all, I remained steadfast, ensuring that Nolan's transgressions were laid bare for all to see. He had made his choices, and now he would pay the price, in full and with interest. It was a harsh lesson, but one that he had brought upon himself. And as I watched him grapple with the fallout, a part of me felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served. The dust had finally settled, and the divorce was finalized. As I stood in the courtroom, listening to the judge's ruling, a sense of relief washed over me. The nightmare was over, and I had emerged victorious. Full custody of Theo, the house, and a substantial portion of our assets. It was more than I could have hoped for. Nolan, on the other hand, was left with little more than the tattered remnants of his once promising career and a mountain of debt. As we exited the courthouse, Elise was waiting for me, her face beaming with pride. "You did it, Bree," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight embrace. "That bastard got exactly what he deserved." I nodded, my throat tightening with emotion. "It's over, finally." In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. With Nolan's financial support, I was able to quit my job and take some much-needed time off, allowing me to be there for Theo in a way I hadn't been able to before. My son, bless his heart, seemed to be handling the upheaval remarkably well. He was too young to fully grasp the complexities of what had transpired, but he knew that his father's absence was a result of his own actions. "Daddy made some bad choices," he said to me one day, his brow furrowed in childlike contemplation. "But you're here for me, Mom. That's what matters." Those words, spoken with such innocent wisdom, filled me with a sense of pride and determination. I had fought tooth and nail to protect my family, to ensure that Nolan's betrayal didn't rob Theo of the stability and love he deserved. And now, as I looked towards the future, I saw a world of possibilities opening up before us. With the financial settlement and the weight of Nolan's betrayal lifted from my shoulders, I felt a newfound sense of freedom, a liberation from the shackles of my past. No longer was I the dutiful wife, blindly trusting and turning a blind eye to the harsh realities around me. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had stared down adversity and emerged stronger for it. In the months that followed, I secured a new job, one that allowed me the flexibility to be present for Theo while still pursuing my own ambitions. It was a fresh start, a clean slate, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. As for Nolan, his life had crumbled around him, the consequences of his actions too severe to brush aside. From what I heard through the grapevine, he had been forced to take a menial job, his once promising career in ruins. Cora, too, had disappeared from the picture, her own reputation tarnished by the scandal. A part of me felt a twinge of pity for them, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of vindication. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the fallout. As I looked back on the tumultuous journey that had brought me to this point, I realized that I had emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The naive, trusting woman I had once been was gone, replaced by a fierce, self-assured version of myself. I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, a role model for my son and a testament to the power of perseverance in the face of adversity. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, armed with the strength and resilience that had carried me through my darkest days. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was in control of my own destiny, and nothing would ever shake that foundation again.
My husband didn't invite his parents to the wedding, but my in-laws stormed in on my wedding day. My mother-in-law shouted at me, "You dishwasher! How did you come into my son's life?" She also insulted my family. I felt embarrassed and asked her to stop speaking. In her anger, she approached me and pulled my hair hard, causing me to drop to the floor. Everyone was shocked. My husband came forward, pulled my mother-in-law back, and asked her to leave the event. I decided to take revenge with the help of my friend. The very next day, I gave them a shocking surprise. My name is Anna Walker, and this is the story of my life, one filled with love, betrayal, and the fight for justice. I'm 29 years old, a law student, but not long ago, I was just a dishwasher at a local restaurant in Seattle, Washington. I never thought I would find love in such an ordinary place, but that's exactly where my story begins. It was a rainy afternoon when Ethan Brooks walked into the diner for the first time. I had been scrubbing dishes in the back, trying to drown out the sounds of clattering plates and the sizzling grill. But when I stepped out to refill a coffee pot, I saw him. Ethan was tall, with dark hair and an easy smile that could light up the dreariest of days. I felt a strange warmth rush over me, an unexpected flutter in my stomach. "Can I get you anything?" I asked, trying to sound professional, but my voice wavered slightly. "Just coffee for now." "Black, please," he replied, looking straight into my eyes. "And maybe your number if you're not too busy." I laughed at his boldness, my cheeks flushing. "Sorry, I don't give my number to customers. Company policy." "Is that so? Well, I'll just have to come back every day until you change your mind," he grinned. And that's precisely what he did. He came in every single day, for 2 weeks. At first, it was just coffee and light conversation. He was charming, asking about my life, and I found myself looking forward to our chats. There was something special about him, something that made me feel seen. Finally, after 2 weeks of his persistent charm, I agreed to go out with him. "Fine," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "One date, but don't get your hopes up, Mr. Brooks." That one date turned into 6 months of pure bliss. We spent countless evenings laughing over cheap takeout, going for walks by the waterfront, and dreaming about the future. Ethan was different from anyone I had ever met. He saw beyond my job as a dishwasher. He appreciated me for who I was, not for my circumstances. But as our relationship deepened, I began to worry about what would happen when he introduced me to his family. Ethan came from wealth, and I worried his parents would look down on me because of my job and my modest background. What if they don't like me? I asked him one evening as we sat on the couch, watching the rain pour outside. "They'll love you. They just need to get to know you," he assured me, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. One evening, just after we celebrated our 6-month anniversary, Ethan surprised me with a proposal. He took me to our favorite spot by the waterfront, where the moonlight danced on the water's surface. "Anna," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "will you marry me?" I was speechless. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded, barely able to breathe. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." As we began planning our wedding, I was excited yet anxious about meeting his parents, Henry and Catherine Brooks. I knew they owned a successful import-export business, but what I didn't know was how harsh their judgment would be. The day finally came when I was introduced to them. We gathered at a lavish restaurant, and as soon as I walked in, I felt small. The Brooks family was everything I wasn't: wealthy, polished, and powerful. Henry was imposing, with a stern expression, while Catherine was all sharp elegance, her eyes scanning me like I was a specimen under a microscope. "Ethan tells us you're a dishwasher?" Catherine asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "Yes," I replied, trying to stand tall. "I work at the diner while I finish my law degree." "Law degrees?" Henry scoffed. "That's quite ambitious for someone in your position." I could feel my heart pounding. "I'm determined to make something of myself," I said, trying to hold my ground. But it only got worse from there. The dinner was filled with thinly veiled insults and judgmental glances. Afterward, as we walked out, I turned to Ethan. "They don't like me," I whispered, my heart sinking. "It doesn't matter. I love you, Anna." "That's all that counts," he replied, but I could sense his tension. However, the situation escalated quickly. Ethan and I decided to have a small wedding, just close friends, no family. I was relieved, but also nervous about what would happen if his parents found out. On the day of our wedding, just as I was about to walk down the aisle, the doors burst open. There stood Henry and Catherine, their faces filled with fury. "What are you doing?" Henry shouted, shocking everyone into silence. Catherine stepped forward, her voice cold as ice. "You can't marry her, Ethan. She's a gold digger. Just look at her." I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. "Please, just let us have our day," I begged, trying to maintain my composure. But Catherine didn't stop. "You think this poor girl can make you happy? She'll only drag you down." As I stood there, my heart racing, I felt tears prick my eyes. I tried to speak up, to defend myself, but before I could say anything, Catherine lunged at me. She pulled my hair hard, and I fell to the ground, completely mortified as gasps filled the room. Ethan surged forward, anger blazing in his eyes. "Get away from her," he shouted, pulling his mother back. "You have no right to treat her like this." In that moment, I realized how serious the situation had become. My wedding day, which was supposed to be filled with joy, had turned into a battleground. And as Henry and Catherine stormed out, leaving us all in shock, I felt a mix of anger and devastation wash over me. The wedding ceremony had been ruined, but I refused to let them have the last word. My heart hardened. I would not let this humiliation define me. It was time to take a stand against the Brooks family and show them that I was more than just a dishwasher. I was determined to reclaim my dignity, no matter the cost. After the disaster that was my wedding day, everything felt shattered. Ethan and I had to pick up the pieces of our relationship, but I could sense a change in him. The humiliation of what happened lingered in the air between us, and though we tried to move forward, it wasn't easy. That night, as we returned home, I could see the worry etched on Ethan's face. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I never thought they would show up like that," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "It's not your fault," I replied, though my heart ached with embarrassment. "But I can't just forget what happened. They think I'm nothing because of my job and background." Ethan took my hands, his grip firm. "You are so much more than that. I love you for who you are, not what you do. We'll figure this out together." Despite his reassurance, I couldn't shake the anger bubbling inside me. I had been pushed to the ground in front of everyone, and my dignity had been stripped away. I needed to do something. I needed to make them pay for the way they treated me. In the days following the wedding, I reached out to Mason Grant, an old friend from law school. He had always been supportive of my ambitions, and I knew he would understand the fire burning within me. "Anna, it's been too long," Mason said when we met at a coffee shop. "What's going on? You look like you've been through a war." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Mason, I need your help. Ethan's parents publicly humiliated me at our wedding. I want to expose their hypocrisy. I want to show everyone who they really are. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you have in mind? I explained my plan to investigate Henry and Catherine's import-export business. I had heard whispers of shady dealings, but I needed concrete evidence. I want to show the world that their wealth comes from illegal activities, I said, my determination shining through. Mason nodded, his expression serious. I can help with that. Let's gather some information and see what we can find. For weeks, we dug into the Brooks family's business. I spent my evenings researching and compiling data while Mason made connections in the industry. We discovered that the Brooks business was not as pristine as they claimed. Rumors of unregistered exports and tax evasion circulated, but we needed proof. One afternoon, while going through public records, Mason stumbled upon a critical piece of information. Anna, look at this, he exclaimed, pointing to his laptop screen. They've been under investigation for potential tax fraud. If we can gather enough evidence, we could bring them down. Excitement and fear flooded my veins. This is it, Mason. We have to dig deeper. As we continued our investigation, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. I was no longer the shy girl working at a diner. I was a woman on a mission, determined to reclaim my dignity and fight back against the prejudice I faced. Each piece of evidence we collected became a stepping stone towards justice. Meanwhile, Ethan was supportive but worried about the risks. Anna, I love your passion, but are you sure you want to do this? It could blow up in your face, he cautioned one evening. I have to do this, Ethan. I can't let them get away with treating me like I'm worthless, I replied, my voice steady. He nodded, though I could see the concern in his eyes. Just be careful. I don't want to lose you in this fight. Weeks turned into months as we meticulously built our case against the Brooks family. I pored over documents, analyzed financial records, and even interviewed former employees who had left under suspicious circumstances. With every new piece of information, my resolve strengthened. I felt like a warrior preparing for battle. Then, just when I thought we had enough evidence to act, we hit a snag. Mason called me one night, his voice tense. Anna, I just heard some unsettling news. The Brooks family is aware that someone is digging into their business. They're not going to let this go quietly. My heart raced. What do you mean? They've been looking for information about you. They might try to intimidate you or worse, he warned. Fear gripped me, but I refused to back down. Let them come. I won't be scared into silence. As the days passed, I realized that the fight wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about standing up for myself, proving my worth, and showing the world that I wouldn't be a victim. I had risen from being a dishwasher to someone who could take on powerful adversaries. And with Ethan by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. But I knew we were entering dangerous territory. The Brooks family was powerful, and I was just a woman with a dream. Little did I know, the confrontation that awaited me would change everything. The tension in the air was palpable as Mason and I prepared to take the next step against the Brooks family. We had gathered substantial evidence against Henry and Catherine's import-export business, but I knew we needed to act carefully. The stakes were high, and I could feel the weight of our plan bearing down on me. Anna, are you sure you're ready for this? Mason asked one evening as we sat in my small apartment, documents sprawled across the table like a battlefield map. I have to be, I replied, my determination unwavering. I won't let them continue to ruin lives with their illegal dealings. It's time to expose them for who they really are. Mason nodded, though his brow furrowed with concern. Okay, let's make sure we have everything in place. Once we go public, there's no turning back. With our plan set, we decided to approach a local news station that had a reputation for investigative reporting. We met with Samantha Reed, a seasoned journalist known for her fierce dedication to uncovering the truth. As we sat in a small conference room, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Tell me everything, Samantha said, her pen poised above her notepad. I took a deep breath and began recounting the events leading up to our investigation, the humiliation at my wedding, the Brooks family's disdain for my background, and our discoveries about their illegal operations. I shared every detail, showing her the evidence we had collected, financial records, testimonies from former employees, and the research Mason had painstakingly compiled. Samantha listened intently, her eyes widening as the pieces fell into place. "This is serious," she said, her voice steady. "If what you say is true, I can help you expose them. We'll set up a detailed report and get this story out to the public." A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. For the first time since the wedding disaster, I felt empowered. With Samantha's help, we would reveal the truth, not just for my sake, but for all the people who had suffered under the Brooks family's shady dealings. Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly with the news station. The closer we got to the story breaking, the more I could sense the Brooks family's looming threat. My phone buzzed with notifications about new rumors spreading online, tales of my so-called gold-digging past resurfacing as if to undermine my credibility. "Anna, they're trying to discredit you," Mason said one day, looking concerned as he scrolled through social media. "We need to be ready for backlash." "I'm not going to let them intimidate me," I replied firmly. "This fight is about more than just us now. It's about showing everyone that they can't get away with this." The day finally arrived when Samantha's report was set to air. I sat in my living room, heart racing as I watched the news. The screen flickered to life, and there was Samantha, poised and professional. "Tonight, we expose a local family accused of illegal activities in their business dealings," she announced, and my heart leaped. As she detailed our findings, I felt a mixture of pride and fear. This was it. We were pulling back the curtain on the Brooks family, shining a light on their dark secrets. But then, just as I thought I was ready for anything, the phone rang. It was Ethan. "Anna, you need to come home right now." "It's urgent," he said, his voice strained. "What's wrong?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "Just come home. Please," he urged. I rushed back to our apartment, fear coursing through me. As I entered, I found Ethan pacing, his face pale. "What's going on?" I demanded. "It's about my parents," he said, running a hand through his hair. "They've been watching you. They're furious about the report." Before I could respond, there was a loud knock on the door. My heart raced as I exchanged worried glances with Ethan. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice shaking. "It's the police," came a voice from the other side. "We need to speak with you." Suddenly, all my fears coalesced into a single thought. The Brooks family wouldn't let this go without a fight. As I opened the door, I braced myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold, knowing that the battle was far from over. As I opened the door, 2 police officers stood before me, their expressions serious. "Ms. Walker," one of them asked, "we need to discuss some allegations related to your investigation into the Brooks family." Ethan stepped forward, concern etched on his face. "What kind of allegations?" he demanded. "Can we come inside?" the officer replied, glancing at the hallway. I nodded, heart racing as I led them into our living room. The weight of uncertainty hung heavy in the air. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We received an anonymous tip claiming that you and your friend may have fabricated evidence against the Brooks family," the officer explained, watching my reaction closely. I felt a surge of anger. "That's absurd. Everything we've uncovered is legitimate. We've been following the law, and we have evidence to prove it." The officer raised a hand. "We're not accusing you of anything yet, but we need to verify the claims. We'd like to see the evidence you've gathered." Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with worry. "Anna, they're trying to turn this around on you. They're scared." I took a deep breath, channeling my determination. "I won't let them intimidate us. They may have power and money, but I have the truth on my side." After the officers left, I turned to Ethan, whose anxiety mirrored my own. "We can't back down now. We need to gather our evidence and be prepared for anything." We spent the next few days compiling every document, testimony, and piece of information we had gathered. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, threats from anonymous accounts attempting to intimidate me further. I refused to let fear take hold. Finally, the day arrived when the police returned for our evidence. We presented everything meticulously, showing them financial records, testimonies from former employees, and documentation of their illegal dealings. With each piece of evidence, I could feel my heart racing, a mixture of dread and determination. After reviewing the files, the officers left with a promise to investigate the claims against the Brooks family thoroughly. I knew we had taken a crucial step, but the battle wasn't over. The Brooks family was still powerful, and I needed to be ready for their retaliation. That night, I called Mason. "I need your help. I feel like they're going to strike back soon," I confessed. "We'll stay ahead of them." "You're not alone in this fight," Mason assured me. His support was a reminder that I had allies who believed in me. The following weeks felt like a tense waiting game. Then, out of the blue, a breakthrough came. Samantha reached out to tell me that her investigation had gained traction. The news of the police investigation into the Brooks family had leaked, and suddenly, their empire was under scrutiny. As the media began to cover the story, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. People began to rally behind me, voicing their support on social media, sharing their own stories of struggle against injustice. I was no longer just a victim. I was a symbol of resilience. In the end, the Brooks family was called to answer for their actions. Henry and Catherine were arrested on multiple charges, including tax fraud and illegal exports. As news of their downfall spread, I felt a sense of justice wash over me. I had fought back against the prejudices and betrayals that had tried to define me. Through it all, Ethan stood by my side, stronger than ever. "You did this, Anna. You stood up and fought for what was right," he said one evening, pulling me close. "Together," I replied, knowing that love and support had been the foundation of my strength. I had gone from being a dishwasher to someone who took on powerful adversaries. I had not only reclaimed my dignity, but also carved a path for my future. I graduated law school with honors and began working as an advocate for others who faced similar injustices. As I stood at the podium during my graduation ceremony, delivering a speech about resilience and justice, I knew my journey was just beginning. The fight against societal prejudice wasn't over, but I was ready to face it head-on, proving that one's worth isn't determined by background or wealth, but by integrity, loyalty, and the courage to stand up for oneself. And so, my story continues, with hope, strength, and the unwavering belief that love can conquer even the darkest of challenges.
"Claire, don't forget to lock up. We're trusting you with the place," Jonah said, giving me one last glance before stepping out the door. "Of course. Enjoy your trip," I replied, trying to muster a sincere smile. I watched as Jonah walked away, the door shutting softly behind him. The house suddenly felt bigger, emptier, even though Jonah's parents were still around somewhere. I sighed, turning the lock with a decisive click. That's when the reality of my situation hit me again. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen. My work laptop awaited me on the dining table, competing with the clutter left by my in-laws. Gregory's golf magazines and Ellen's knitting projects had taken over every available surface. Our once tidy home now felt like a chaotic battleground. "Claire, could you be a dear and make some tea?" Ellen's voice floated in from the living room. My jaw clenched, but instead of answering, I grit my teeth and filled the kettle with water. I was getting used to these constant requests, though each one chipped away at my patience. I glanced at the stack of bills accumulating next to my laptop, frustrated that no one else seemed to notice or care. Jonah and I had been happy once, before his parents moved in unannounced. We hadn't even celebrated our first anniversary when they showed up, their car loaded with luggage and the announcement, "We need to stay for just a while, dear." That while had now stretched into months. "Claire, you should come and sit with us," Gregory called out. His tone was always commanding, never quite asking. Feeling cornered, I obliged, carrying Ellen's tea into the cluttered living room. She took it without a word of thanks, her attention glued to the television. "So, Jonah mentioned your project is going well," Gregory began, his eyes flicking over my disheveled appearance. "Good for you." "Yeah, it's keeping me busy," I replied, forcing myself to sit on the edge of the couch. "Busy is good, but don't forget your duties at home," Ellen added, stirring her tea with a patronizing smile. The conversation was always the same. Any success I had at work was downplayed, overshadowed by their narrow views of my responsibilities. Jonah's lack of action grated on me, his unwillingness to confront them only making things worse. "Claire," Jonah had said a week ago, looking anxious, "they're just old and set in their ways. It'll get better." But it hadn't. As much as I loved Jonah, his optimism felt like a betrayal. To him, keeping the peace with his parents was paramount, but for me, it was making life unbearable. I bit my tongue once more, swallowing the retort forming in my mind. A notification pinged on my laptop, a reminder of the client meeting I had in 10 minutes. "I need to get back to work," I stated, rising from my precarious seat on the couch. My heart pounded, every interaction with them feeling like a test of endurance. Gregory waved me off dismissively, eyes returning to his newspaper. Ellen merely nodded, engrossed in her knitting. Back at the table, I pushed aside their clutter to make room for my work, the weight of my situation pressing down on me once again. I wondered how many more facades I could wear, how many more compromises I could stomach. Jonah's easygoing nature felt like a distant memory, replaced by an unsettling complacency. My idyllic visions of married life crumbled with each passing day, shadowed by the constant presence of his parents. The kettle whistled, its sharp sound piercing through my reverie. Another tea break for Ellen, another test of patience for me. As I poured the boiling water, I looked out the window, wondering if I'd ever reclaim the peace I'd once envisioned for our home. Endless days of small sacrifices loomed ahead, but deep down, a flicker of determination sparked. Something had to give, and I wouldn't let it be myself. "Claire, there's something wrong with the dishwasher again. It never happens when Jonah uses it." Ellen's voice cut through my focus as I worked at the dining table. I clenched the edge of my laptop, taking a quick breath. "Jonah doesn't even know how to use it. He never cleans up." I fired back, trying to keep my voice steady. Ellen's eyes narrowed. "That's because he works hard all day, unlike you, who can work from home and still manage to mess things up." I got up and walked to the kitchen, trying to kill the conversation. Ellen trailed behind me, her disapproving presence filling the space. I opened the dishwasher, fiddling with the controls just to do something with my hands. Gregory appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a smug look. "You wouldn't have these issues if you just did things right, Claire." My patience was wearing thin. "Maybe you two could help out once in a while," I snapped, unable to hold back. Gregory chuckled, the sound grating my nerves. "Help? We're guests here. It's your job to make us comfortable." I slammed the dishwasher shut. It was clear nothing I said would matter. Retreating to the dining table, I tried to bury myself in work, but their voices kept pulling me back into the toxic atmosphere. Jonah appeared briefly in the evening, but his presence did little to ease the tension. "Hey, Claire, everything all right?" he asked, looking between me and his parents. "Just peachy," I replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Your parents seem to think I'm the maid." Ellen piped up. "We only ask for small favors. Jonah, Claire should be able to handle it." Jonah frowned, glancing at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, Claire. Can we talk about this later?" I pushed my chair back, frustration boiling over. "No, Jonah, we need to talk about this now." But he wilted, his eyes darting back to his parents. "Another time, okay?" he said softly. I walked away, feeling a mixture of anger and despair. Their manipulation and his avoidance were driving a wedge deeper and deeper. Upstairs, I checked my credit card statement on a whim and froze. "Jonah!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. He scrambled up the stairs, his parents close behind. "What is it?" he asked, bewildered. "Did you use my credit card?" I demanded, showing him the statement with luxury purchases I never made. Jonah looked blank. "No, I didn't." Gregory stepped forward. "We did. We needed a few things, and we assumed it was fine." "You assumed," I repeated, disbelief lacing my voice. "You charged thousands of dollars without asking?" Ellen's face turned cold. "We're family. What's yours is theirs, too." "No," I said, shaking with fury. "That's not how this works." I threw the credit card on the bed, fighting a scream. Jonah looked helpless, his face pale. "I'll talk to them, Claire. I promise." I backed away, disgusted. "Promises mean nothing if you don't act on them, Jonah," I said, storming out of the room, leaving them to stew in the mess they created. Their voices continued downstairs, but I tuned them out, feeling more isolated than ever. I needed a plan, something to reclaim my life. That's when a burning resolve started to form. Enough was enough. It was high time things changed, and I was going to make sure they did. Days blurred together as I threw myself into work. Projects piled up, deadlines loomed, but I found a strange solace in my tasks. Each design, each client meeting kept me away from the chaos at home. My colleagues noticed my dedication to the job, offering words of encouragement and praise. "Claire," Ryan said, leaning on my cubicle wall, "you're on fire lately. How do you do it?" "It's called survival," I joked, though a part of me meant it. Ryan laughed. "Well, keep it up. Management's noticed. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a promotion in your future." His words lit a small spark of hope. At least one part of my life was under control. Back home, things were as unbearable as ever. Gregory and Ellen's dominance grew stronger by the day. They moved my belongings without asking, filled the house with their things, and hovered over every aspect of my life. It was suffocating. One evening, I came home to find Ellen rearranging my office. "Ellen, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice strained from a long day. "Your space was too cluttered." "I'm organizing it," she replied nonchalantly. My jaw clenched. I like my things where they were. "Well, it's better this way," she insisted, not bothering to pause. At dinner, the conversation turned acidic. "Claire, maybe you should take cooking classes," Gregory suggested with a smirk. "Your meals could use some improvement." I stared at him, wondering how he could be so condescending. "Maybe you should appreciate the fact that I'm cooking at all." Gregory chuckled, turning to Jonah. "See, son, this is what I mean. A little gratitude goes a long way." Jonah looked uneasy, trapped between us. "Let's just eat," he said, attempting to steer clear of another confrontation. The final straw came when I checked my bank account and found another series of unauthorized transactions. This time, it was for an expensive spa package. I stormed into the living room, holding the bank statement in my hand. "More charges, really?" I yelled. "You spent $1,200 on a spa?" Ellen barely looked up from her knitting. "Relax, Claire. It was just a treat. We needed it." "You needed it? How about asking before using my money?" I spat. Gregory looked up from his newspaper, unfazed. "This isn't all your money, Claire. We're family." "No, this is theft," I countered, my voice shaking with rage. The tension in the room thickened. Jonah stepped in, trying to mediate. "Claire, we'll sort this out, right, Mom? Dad?" Ellen and Gregory shrugged, clearly not taking it seriously. Jonah's attempts to placate me only deepened my feeling of betrayal. I left the room, retreating to my work once again, using it as my only escape. Then the promotion came. Management called me in, offering me a senior graphic designer role. The additional workload meant more time at the office, and I clung to the opportunity like a lifeline. I spent longer hours at work, enjoying the camaraderie of my colleagues and the satisfaction of my achievements. At home, I distanced myself, focusing on my future. The bitterness I felt towards Jonah and his parents grew, fueling my determination to take action. Late one night, as I walked through the empty office, Ryan found me packing up. "Big plans for the weekend? More work," I admitted. "Keeps me sane." He nodded. "If you ever need to talk, you know where to find me." His support gave me a momentary reprieve, but I knew my real battle lay ahead. It was time to reclaim my life, no matter the cost. I started to outline my next steps, every small detail fueling my resolve. I opened the front door to find a note taped to it. "Gone for a week, back soon." It read in Ellen's flowery handwriting. My heart sank and then spiked in anger. They hadn't mentioned any trip, let alone asked for permission to leave like this. My mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was certain: I was done being their doormat. I walked inside, each step echoing through the empty house. The kitchen was a mess, unwashed dishes piled in the sink, crumbs scattered across the counters. The living room was no better. The TV was left on, magazines were strewn everywhere, and Ellen's knitting needles lay tangled on the coffee table. "Unbelievable," I muttered, grabbing a trash bag. As I worked my way through the house, I spotted my credit card bill on the dining table. My hands trembled as I opened it, each charge feeling like a slap in the face. My eyes widened, seeing several $1,000s spent on their spontaneous trip. I dialed Jonah's number, fury boiling inside me. "Hey, Claire," he answered, sounding oddly relaxed. "Where the hell are you?" I demanded. "Oh, we decided to take a quick trip to Las Vegas," he stammered. "I thought I told you." "No, you didn't," I hissed, "and you used my credit card again." Claire, it's not like that, Jonah tried to explain, but my patience snapped. You took them on a vacation with my money while I'm here working my tail off? I shouted. Silence followed on his end, an indication of his usual avoidance strategy. You know what? Enjoy your trip, I said icily, and hung up. Alone in the house, my rage fueled my next steps. I called a lawyer first thing in the morning. I need to discuss selling a house, I said, setting an urgent appointment. Next, I contacted a real estate agent. I want the house on the market immediately. I instructed, how fast can we move? With the current market, pretty quickly, the agent replied. We'll start the paperwork right away. I spent the next few days stealthily packing my belongings. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. With each box taped up, my resolve strengthened. I also found a small apartment downtown, perfect for a fresh start. The sense of reclaiming control over my life was exhilarating. I walked through each room of the house, making mental notes of what to take and what to leave behind. The thought of selling everything they had taken over was the sweetest form of revenge. Jonah tried calling several times, but I ignored each one. I needed clarity, and his excuses only fogged it up. Every box packed was a step closer to my freedom, and a step farther from the prison my home had become. With everything organized and the house ready for sale, I spent my last night there. It felt surreal, like shedding an old skin. The space was empty, just like the emotional void left by Jonah and his parents. I could almost hear their voices, bossing me around, belittling me. But now, I no longer cared. The deed was done. By the time they returned, they wouldn't recognize the place nor their control over it. With a last look around, I locked the door, stepping out into the cool night air, savoring the first taste of freedom and the sweet scent of impending karma. The door creaked shut behind me as I entered my new apartment, a small, tidy space downtown. My boxes were neatly stacked along the wall, and the sight of them made me feel a deep sense of accomplishment. One by one, I began unpacking, placing my things exactly where I wanted them, this time with no interference. I had arrangements to make. First, I visited my lawyer. Claire, everything looks in order, she confirmed, flipping through the documents she had prepared. If you're sure about this, we can push the sale through quickly. Do it, I replied without hesitation. Next stop was the real estate agent's office. The house is now listed, she informed me. I've already had several inquiries. Great, I said, feeling a spark of satisfaction. Let's make it happen as fast as possible. As the days passed, I balanced work and my covert operation. By day, I was the diligent graphic designer, throwing myself into my new role. By night, I moved essentials into the apartment, making it feel more like home. The only messages I received from Jonah were attempts to soothe my burning anger, but they went unanswered. One particular evening, I found myself in the office late, a usual occurrence now. Ryan, my colleague, noticed me as he packed up to leave. Burning the midnight oil again? He asked, coming to lean on my desk. Yeah, lots to do, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Want to grab a coffee? You look like you could use a break, he offered. Sure, I agreed, realizing that a bit of normalcy could do me some good. At the cafe, we sipped our drinks in a comfortable silence before Ryan broke it. Something's been bugging you, he said, more of a statement than a question. I sighed, deciding if I should burden him with my mess. It's complicated at home, I finally admitted. If you ever need help, I'm here, he said, his sincerity touching me in ways Jonah's evasions never did. Thanks, Ryan, I said softly, appreciating the gesture more than he knew. The next morning, I received a call from my real estate agent. Claire, we have a buyer, she announced. They're offering more than the asking price and want to close quickly. Let's do it, I said, feeling elated. The final pieces were falling into place. With the sale nearly complete, I returned to my apartment, envisioning the look on Jonah and his parents' faces when they returned. They wouldn't know what hit them. The last detail involved formalizing the divorce. I made sure the papers were prepared and ready for when they returned. My plan was airtight, each step meticulously thought out and executed. Packing the last of my belongings from the house, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had no regrets. They had pushed me to this point, and now they would face the consequences. I locked the door one final time, leaving the key under the mat with a note. We're done. I stepped away, my new life awaiting me. The control I had fought so hard to reclaim was finally mine, and as I walked towards my future, the weight lifted from my shoulders and was replaced by a renewed strength. I stood by the window of my new apartment, watching the minute hand on the clock crawl. Any moment now they'd come back from their trip. I could almost picture their confused faces when they found themselves locked out. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed. It was Jonah. I let it ring twice before picking up. "What's happening here? We can't get into the house," he yelled, his voice frantic. "I sold it," I said calmly. There was silence on the other end of the line. "You? What?" Jonah finally spluttered. "I sold the house. It's done," I repeated, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. "You can't do that. This is our home." Ellen's voice shrieked in the background. "No," I replied, my voice cold as steel. "It was my home. You've been nothing but uninvited guests." Jonah was silent, too stunned to respond. Ellen grabbed the phone from him. "We'll see about this, Claire. We'll get a lawyer. You'll regret this," she threatened. "Do whatever you feel you need to," I said, unbothered. "But the paperwork is ironclad. You'll find no loopholes." On the other end, I could hear Gregory cursing. "This isn't over, Claire," he snarled before the call dropped. I sighed, placing my phone on the counter. I glanced around my new apartment, feeling the first threads of true peace. The next morning I stood by my lawyer's office, ready for the storm. Jonah, Ellen, and Gregory arrived, their faces a mixture of fury and desperation. I stepped outside to meet them. "Claire, let's be reasonable," Jonah started, his voice wavering. "We can work this out." "We tried," I countered. "You chose them over our marriage time and time again. This is the result." Ellen stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "We took you in, treated you like family." "Your idea of family is using me as a bank and a maid," I fired back. "That's not family." Gregory leered at me. "You'll pay for this, Claire." "No, I'm done paying," I answered firmly, handing Jonah the divorce papers. "Sign these. We're finished." The neighbors nearby began to gather, their curiosity piqued by the spectacle. Jonah glanced at the growing audience, his face flushed with embarrassment. Ellen looked ready to burst, her hands shaking as she snatched the papers from me. "You can't do this," she screamed. "We'll fight you." But their threats fell flat. "Go ahead," I said loudly, making sure the neighbors heard. "But you'll find that legally, you've got no standing. This is my house, my money, and now, my life." Gregory tried to lunge at me, but Jonah held him back, looking defeated. "Just sign the papers, Dad. We have no choice." Ellen gave a final, venomous glare before grabbing a pen and signing the papers with trembling hands. Gregory followed, his anger palpable. Jonah was last, his eyes locking with mine one final time before he signed. "Goodbye, Jonah," I said, turning to leave. The weight of revenge lifted, replaced by a lighter, unburdened spirit. I felt empowered and strong, walking away from the chaos they tried to bind me in. Back at my apartment, I smiled genuinely for the first time in months. It was over. Finally, truly over. The power they had wielded was gone, and in its place, I found my freedom. As the door clicked shut behind me, I knew without a doubt that my new chapter had just begun. In the days following the confrontation, the fallout was swift and dramatic. Jonah, Ellen, and Gregory scrambled to find a place to stay, thrown into disarray. I heard through the grapevine that they had checked into a cheap motel nearby, their former grandeur reduced to complaining about the thin walls and bad service. My days, however, were looking brighter. The air in my new apartment seemed fresher, every small action of my newfound freedom. At work, things were electric. My colleagues noticed a spring in my step, and more than one asked what had changed. "Claire, you're glowing," Ryan commented as we worked on a project. "Did something good happen?" "You could say that," I replied, a genuine smile forming. The feeling of taking back control was better than any spa day the Crosbys could have charged to my card. Meanwhile, Ellen and Gregory's attempts to save face were failing spectacularly. Gregory tried calling in favors from his business contacts, hoping someone would provide a temporary space or financial aid. The responses were as cold as his heart, each rejection a blow to his inflated ego. Ellen's threats of legal action fell apart quickly. My lawyer, Kate, was thorough and efficient. "Don't worry, Claire," she reassured me over the phone. "They have no grounds to stand on. You made sure of that." Their public disgrace brought a strange satisfaction. The neighbors talked in hushed tones about the family who had been so unceremoniously evicted. Each muttered word was a victory for me. The old me would have felt guilty, but no more. I was done with feeling sorry for them. Ellen, ever the instigator, couldn't resist calling me. "This isn't over, Claire. You'll pay for humiliating us," she spat through the phone. I chuckled, the sound surprising even me. "Ellen, your ettes are empty. Move on." "I have." Click. I hung up, feeling lighter. Ryan, who'd overheard my side of the conversation, raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said, my grin widening. Jonah showed up once at my apartment, a last-ditch effort. He looked harried, his eyes pleading. "Claire, please, can we talk?" I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Talk about what, Jonah? You made your choices." "I'm sorry," he started, but I cut him off. "Sorry isn't good enough," I said firmly. "You chose them over us, over me, and now you face the consequences." Jonah's shoulders sagged. I didn't know things would get this bad. "Well, they did, and now it's time for you to deal with it," I replied. "Goodbye, Jonah." Closing the door on him felt like closing a door on the last remnants of my past. I felt a rush of empowerment, a clear signal that I was moving forward. Ryan caught me after work that day. "You really are something, Claire," he said with admiration in his eyes. "Just doing what needed to be done," I replied simply. Back in my apartment, I toasted to my newfound peace. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life, my independence. The sight of Jonah, Ellen, and Gregory struggling was merely the cherry on top. I curled up with a book, the quiet of my space a comforting blanket. The drama was behind me, and the future ahead seemed full of promise. For the first time in a long while, I could envision a life free from manipulation and control. And that was the sweetest victory of all. Settling into my new apartment brought a sense of liberation I hadn't felt in years. I threw myself into my new role at work with gusto, thriving in the creative energy and camaraderie of my team. The promotion meant longer hours, but I welcomed them, relishing every new challenge that came my way. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Ryan caught me as I was packing up. "Hey, Claire, a few of us are going out for drinks. Care to join?" For a moment, I hesitated, then smiled. "Why not?" At the bar, the conversation flowed easily. Ryan and I exchanged stories, shared laughs. It felt good to unwind, surrounded by friends who respected me. "So you're finally free from that madhouse, huh?" Ryan said, clinking his glass against mine. "Yeah, it feels like I can finally breathe again," I replied, a genuine smile on my face. Despite the emotional fallout from the divorce, I found myself enjoying my independence. My days were full, my nights peaceful. The anxiety that once gripped me was replaced by a newfound sense of joy. One day, as I was leaving the office, my younger coworker, Ethan, caught up to me. "Hey, Claire, you got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" I asked, curious. Ethan looked a bit nervous, scratching the back of his head. "I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner sometime. Just the two of us." I blinked, caught off guard. "Dinner? Are you asking me out, Ethan?" He chuckled, a bit embarrassed. "Yeah, I guess I am." I smiled, considering his offer. "I'd like that." "When?" "How about tomorrow night? There's this great Italian place I know." "Sounds perfect," I said, feeling an unfamiliar flutter of excitement. The next evening, we met at the cozy Italian restaurant. Conversation flowed easily, and Ethan's youthful exuberance was infectious. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't in a long time. "You seem different now," Ethan noted, twirling his fork. "Happier." "I am," I admitted. "It's been a tough journey, but I'm finally finding myself again." Ethan smiled warmly. "Well, I'm glad. You deserve to be happy." As the evening drew to a close, we walked back to my apartment. Ethan hesitated at the door, looking as if he wanted to say something. "Thank you for tonight," I said, breaking the silence. "I had a great time." "Me too," Ethan replied, leaning in for a quick, shy kiss on the cheek. "Good night, Claire." "Good night, Ethan," I said, closing the door and feeling a warmth spread through me. Inside, I sat down with a content sigh. Life was starting to unfold in ways I never imagined. The past was behind me, and a future full of possibilities lay ahead. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and I spent more time together. We explored the city, shared meals, and laughed late into the night. It was refreshing to be with someone who appreciated me for who I was, without any hidden agendas or manipulations. With each passing day, I realized how strong I had become. No more compromises. No more living under someone else's thumb. This was my life, and I was determined to live it on my own terms. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I felt a profound sense of peace. The chaos and drama of the past were behind me, replaced by a calm, steady happiness. This was my new chapter, a fresh start. And for the first time in a long while, I felt optimistic about the future, confident that I could handle whatever came my way.